Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. So to start with an overview of this novel, originally published in 1969, the story opens with an intergalactic explorer setting the scene of winter, also known as Guin, an icy world inhabited by humanoids with a distinctly genderless society. The Guinians are genderless because the people on the planet exist in an androgynous state, normally going into a state of kimmer or asexual reproduction every 23 days. So to go into the plot and pacing of the story, Genli I, an emissary from Earth, is on a mission to enlighten the governments and peoples of Guin of the Yuccamen. The Yuccamen is a conglomeration of planets across the universe inhabited by humanoids to establish shared culture and trade. The pacing of this story is a bit mixed. There are only 20 chapters, but the chapters switch narrators, style, and length. For instance, one chapter may be recounting Genli I's travels and observations, and the next will be a folk tale depicting important cultural beliefs or history of the Guinian people. Now to talk about some of the prevalent characters in this story. We have two primary characters in this story who also act as our narrators. Firstly, Genli I, a young male from our Earth who is working to decipher the cultural differences on Guin, a society of really complex and delicate social etiquette. Secondly, we have Estraven, who is the former prime minister of one of the kingdom's government. Estraven is someone who Genli I knows, but he doesn't necessarily trust. There are a good deal of other characters in the story, and most of them have really complex names or titles. It can be a little bit daunting when you're reading through to try and remember who is who, but I think as you progress throughout the story, it becomes a bit easier to decipher the author's writing style and to determine which characters are actually relevant and worth remembering. Now to talk about some of the themes in the story. Firstly, we see a lot of yin, yang, light, dark, and the balance of the world. So the novel is actually called The Left Hand of Darkness. This is in reference to a passage where it's observed that the left hand of darkness is light, evoking the idea of a natural balance. In tandem with this idea, as Genli I is forced to make a winter's journey across a massive continent-spanning glacier, he's faced with seemingly unnatural events, including periods of unending daylight, thorough cold, as the planet is called winter, and periods of starvation and sleep deprivation. The second prevalent idea that's examined in this story is that of government and specifically bureaucracy. So in this story, we see a lot of government corruption and the general incompetence across different countries and cultures. The idea of saving face is referenced in the story and acts as a major behavioral determination for the Guinian people, particularly those in politics. Tied to this idea as well is a seeming clash of individualism mixed with the beginnings of forming nationalism. So Guinians in general are extremely welcoming people, yet they're also very distrusting of strangers, and they present an air of indifference while also being extremely nosy. As you can see through these descriptions, there are seemingly endless contradictions with Genli I's observations of an alien people. With this in mind, we should understand that he is not a reliable narrator and his understanding is extremely limited, leading to common miscommunications. This ties to my next theme of cultural differences. In a lot of ways, the story is an exploration of a cultural clash. Our human guide on an alien world only sees surface levels of intentions and commonly offends or takes offense due to a language barrier and a difference in cultural custom. While reading the story, I thought this was a really interesting point to describe. Similar to being a tourist on Earth, without a guide, you can feel lost or even threatened when faced with something that you may not understand. Next, I want to talk about an idea of loneliness. So I can only imagine how lonely it must be to exist as an alien on an alien world. For Genli, he's alone in so many ways. He's biologically different from the Gathenians, and we talked about how culturally he's also very different. But there is a moment when Gimli is traveling across the glacier where, in the midst of a vast expanse of snow and ice, no civilization for hundreds of miles, he and his travel companion connect on a deeply human level, realizing they are, the both of them, completely alone here in this moment, meaning they're completely separated from society and literally geographically not even encountering other people or living things here on the ice for months. It's in this moment that they're able to find unity, and Gimli seems to understand that his loneliness is shared, making him for the first time not alone. Next, I want to talk about one of the most interesting and prevalent themes within the story, which is the idea of gender and sexuality. A question that Gimli seems to be pondering throughout the text is, how can sex exist without gender? And within a genderless society, where could he fit in as a permanently gendered being? So firstly, he knows that sex exists here unashamedly and openly as a part of daily life. While the Gathenians don't stigmatize the act of sex in itself, they do shy away from sexuality, referring to chemically forced sexual emergence as perversion, and Gimli I as one with permanent sexual organs as a pervert. For the Gathenians, sex has a place and is accepted, but sexuality, or the pleasure of sex, is not. Out of Kimmer, Gathenians are not motivated by sex. This adds another layer of complexity in Gimli's place in society. Where could he fit? Or how could he even be accepted if his impulses are biologically programmed to involve sex? The answer is simply that he doesn't have a place. Additionally, from his perspective, an attraction to an ungendered person, would this be defined as queerness? From Gimli's view, all Gathenians are described as masculine, he, him, his. However, this is illogical, as all of the people on this world are ungendered. I think this encourages the argument of his queerness, as he describes his attraction to Gathenians, but simultaneously describes them as male. Now to talk about some of the good and bad elements of the story. So firstly, this is definitely the type of book that makes you think. I think you can look at it from and appreciate it from multiple perspectives, meaning that you could read this and enjoy it only as a science fiction story, or you could honestly write a dissertation about it and the way that gender is personified throughout the text. Secondly, the world building is actually really, really good. I would compare it to other classics like Lord of the Rings or Dune. However, similarly to those stories, this can actually be a little bit of a double-edged sword, as things like character names, societal concepts, and language can be a bit hard to follow, especially in your first deep dive of the text. Now to give my final thoughts. Honestly, I thought this was a really, really cool sci-fi novel. Probably my favorite sci-fi novel that I've read, and it can definitely be reviewed again from so many perspectives because the world building is so vast and the text is so multifaceted. Whether you're a fan of sci-fi stories or stories which really take a look into deeper questions on the role of gender, society, politics, I think this is a super excellent story that should be much more widely known and appreciated, and I would definitely recommend that you pick it up. So I'm super curious to know, has anybody read The Left Hand of Darkness? Have you read anything else by Ursula K. Le Guin? If you did read it, what did you think? Do you agree with some of my points, my findings, or the ideas I shared today? Did you have a completely different take on the story? I'd love to read some books similar to this if you know of other maybe classic science fiction or these stories which take a deeper look at the societies that we live in and the human experience. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.